All right, so on the first one, okay, again, domain and range. The main thing to remember, domain is the x's, or x-axis, however you want to think about it. Range is the y-axis, or the y's. Okay, but the whole thing with this, okay, is like, I said x and y axis, but right now we don't have a graph, so there is no axis. All right, so we kind of have to understand, like, you guys have to be able to figure out, like, how is it going to change when, depending on what we're given. All right, so if we're given these right here, remember these squiggly brackets, I call them, that's just a way of making a list. Okay, that's the way that's like the brackets we put around a mathematical list. So what this is a list of points. All right, there's a point there, there's a point there, a point there, a point there, a point there. So this, whatever this list that we're looking at is, it's literally just a list of 5 random points. Okay, there's no pattern, there's no order, they're just random. All right, so if we want the domain of these random points, we just want all of the x's. Okay, so remember when in a point, right, it's x comma y. All right, so the domain of this one should be -7, comma 3, comma 8, comma -6, comma -2. All right, but the only thing about this is when you go to look for your answer, they're always going to be like in increasing order. So you kind of have to rearrange them. All right, so like smallest first, next smallest, next smallest, next. I mean, you don't technically have to do it like on your paper, but when you go to pick the answer, you're not going to see this one. It'll be the same numbers, but they're going to be listed in order from smallest to biggest. Okay, so like just going to the drop-down menu. And this one, see, like there's 2 options, right? The first one only has 4 numbers in it, though. And remember, we said there were 5 points. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 points. So that means there should be 5 x's in the domain. So technically, like, even if you didn't know what the numbers were, if you knew there had to be 5 of them, then it would have to be this one. Yeah, this will be up on YouTube. Yep, and you can go if you have no questions. Yeah, sorry, Shakira. Yep, I'm taking it right now. I'm going to pause it real quick. For the range, okay, the range is the same thing, but you just list all the y's. All right, so it should be this one, should be this one, this one, this one, this one. All right, now notice here how there's 2 5s. Okay, so we're only going to have to put the 5 once. All right, so we got a 2, we got a 3, we got a 4, and we got a 5. Well, we got 2 5s. But remember, if we're listing numbers, you don't have to list the same number twice. That kind of wouldn't make sense. All right, so the range for this one should be 2, 3, 4, 5. So for the second one now, again, they're asking the same questions, find the domain and range, but now we don't have a bunch of points. Now we have an actual graph. Okay, so this is when we want to think about the domain as the x-axis. And when I say x-axis, I mean basically like, where does it start and stop on the x-axis? All right, so if you look right here, x is this one. So if I follow this all the way down this way, that right there is where it starts on the x-axis. Right? That's 1. And then if we follow the graph to the right now, because remember, we're thinking left to right, where it starts and stops on the x-axis. It's going to go this way and keep going to the right forever. Okay, when it goes forever, whenever there's an arrow, if something's going to continue on forever, that's when we put the infinity sign. Okay, and then remember now, there's got to be brackets around them. The infinity sign always has a parenthesis. That's a comma in the middle. But remember, the numbers could have a square bracket if it's a closed dot, if the graph actually gets there. So because this is closed, we make it a square bracket. If it looked like this, if the graph looked like this right here at the end, if it was like an open circle with nothing in the middle, you just saw white through the paper, then it would be this one. Okay, that means open dot. And just remember, the infinities always get the parenthesis. Range is the y-axis, so now we're paying attention up and down now. What's the lowest the graph's going to go? What's the highest it's going to go? All right, so if you look at it here, this is the lowest it gets right here, right? And that's 0. And then if you follow the graph, it's kind of hard to tell, but if you follow it, notice that it keeps going up a little bit. It's going like up and up and up and up. It's going to keep going up forever. Okay, and so that means infinity. All right, and since this dot was closed, okay, the 0 should have a square bracket, and the infinity never does. Okay, so range up and down, domain left and right. What I want you guys to do when they're asking for domain and range of a function, an equation, okay, just go to Desmos, find a graph of it, right? So that way we can make it get back to what we just did on number 2, right? Because with a graph, it's pretty easy to do. Okay, so then if we could just get a picture of this, we can go back to what we just did on number 2. So 3 times 5 to the x, 3 times 5 to the x power. Okay, so here's our graph. All right, remember now the domain, okay? The domain is left to right. So how far is it going to go left? How far is it going to go right? All right, now this one, we can tell, I mean, there's no arrows on Desmos, but if it keeps going out of the screen, that means it's going to go forever. Like, it's not just going to all of a sudden stop. Okay, so if you wanted to, if you wanted to see that for yourself, you could zoom out. And you can see that it keeps going to the left forever. Okay? So, the domain, the first part of the domain is going to be negative infinity. And it's only negative because it's left. Remember, these are all the negative numbers are on the left. So that way forever is negative infinity. That way forever is positive infinity. And I'm only on the x-axis because we're talking about domain, which is talking about the x-axis. All right, and so if you followed it to the right, you can see that it's going to keep going forever to the right. Okay, does that not make sense to anybody? Lowest to highest. Okay, so this one's going to be a little tricky. We're going to have to talk about some stuff here, okay? Now, I just want to get this part out of the way right now. Are we all in agreement that it's going to keep going up forever? Does anybody not understand how on the right it's going to keep going up forever? I mean up, sorry. Not on the right, on the top. Or I guess as we move to the right, it's going to keep going up forever is what I meant. Okay? So, we'll get that part out of the way. Now, all we're trying to figure out is how low is it going to get? All right, so it definitely looks like it's getting to 0. Okay, but is it ever going to go lower than 0? Like, let me do the zooming out thing again. Now it looks like a horizontal line. It doesn't look like a curve. That's just because I'm zoomed out. Just keep that in mind. But I mean, I can move all the way over here to the left, negative 350. And if I click on the line, right, it says 0. So it's definitely not going to get below 0. So going back to our range, it's pretty safe to say that this number is going to be a 0. All right, we just have to figure out now the bracket. Is it going to be a square bracket? Or is it going to be a parenthesis? And so to figure that out, like if you're asking yourself that question, is it a square bracket or a parenthesis? What you're really asking yourself is, does it get there? Or will it get there, I guess is better. One less letter. Will it get to that number? Will it ever actually get to 0? That's the question we have to ask ourselves whenever you're trying to figure out square bracket or parenthesis. So what do you guys think on this one? Do you think it's actually going to get there? I know that when I click on it, the point says 0. Okay, but what do you guys think? No, it's not. I think we talked about this. So like right here, okay, this is the only thing I don't like about Desmos. Like you click on this point and it says it's up at 0. But watch, if we zoom in right there, I'm zooming in on 40. And again, you're not going to have to do this every time you do it. I'm just doing this to show you this is how exponential equations work and their graphs. Remember, square is if it gets there. If it gets there, it's square. If it doesn't get there, it's a parenthesis. That's why we put a parenthesis on the infinity, because you can never get to infinity. It's not an actual number. So square if it gets there, parenthesis if it doesn't get there. Still trying to zoom in to show you. Oh, it won't let me zoom in anymore. Oh, so you can see now. How do you... There's got to be a way to zoom in more. Oh my gosh. Shouldn't be this hard to show you. Uh-oh. Now everything is like frozen. Okay. Anyways. So as we move over to the right, we're multiplying. So if we went backwards, we'd be dividing. Right? And if you keep dividing something by 2, you're never even going to actually get to 0. It's going to be a really, really small decimal. So this one, the domain, remember those were both infinities. The range, it was a 0, but doesn't get there. Okay, so it should be this option here. Does that make sense, Janessa? And everybody else? Number 4. All right, now we're basically, they're asking us questions about a graph. Okay? So the first one, if you look at part A, where f of x equals g of x in English, that's where the graphs meet. Okay, where they equal each other is where they're the same. All right, which is basically, and you guys have done this in 8th grade and probably 7th grade, is they're intersecting points. Right, so there's 2 points where they intersect. All right, but the main thing to understand here is what the question is asking us. Okay, they're asking us when they meet, what do the x's equal? What does x equal? All right, so the 2 points that we need are the two. If you think about it, like this one, they meet here at 0, -4, but we only want the x. Okay, so that's going to be one of your answers. Over here, they meet at -8, 5. Right? But again, we only want the x's. So you're actually going to have 2 answers in here. Okay, you just separate them by commas. You do them the same way. All right, so notice like whenever we write function notation, right, it's always f and then an x inside the parentheses. All right, well what they did here is they replaced the x with a number. Okay, so what that's telling you to do is go to that number on the x-axis and then see how far you have to move down before you run into the graph. Okay, so I'm going to do f is right here in purple because they cross each other, so it's kind of hard to... All right, f is right here in purple. And then we'll do G in gold. All right, and I actually wrote this point to the wrong one. Okay, so again, we want to go over to that, whatever number is in here, those are the x's. Okay, so for g of 0, we need to start at 0 on the x-axis, on this one, and then go down until we run into g. Okay, however many you went down, that's what the answer is. So g of 0, we had to go down 4. That means the answer to g of 0 is -4. All right, then for f of 0, you do the same thing. You just go down until you hit f instead. But if you notice here, it's actually the same amount you have to go down to hit both of them because that's where they cross. So these ones should both be -4. And then you just add those 2 numbers up, and that's how you get the final answer. Okay, and then f of 0 is the same thing. It's asking the same exact question, but it's asking it for the f line, not the g line. So it's asking on the f line, when x is 0, what is y? Okay, so I'm gonna go trace the f line now. Same question. Right, it's saying when x is 0, what is y on f though? Okay, so I go over to 0 again, go down to f, same point, right? So that's also -4. So they both happen to come out to the same thing, which is just a coincidence. It's not going to happen like that every time. All right, but then you just have to add them together to get the answer. So when you do g of 0 or f of 0 or something like that, you should come out with just one number. Same thing, but you're going to a different spot now on the x-axis. Okay, so now you're not going to go to 0, you're going to go over to -8. All right, so that's right here. So now we're going to have to go up until we hit the graphs. Okay, so to figure out what those are, you're going to have to figure out how much you had to go up to land on each different graph.